The skies of Rixia, 12 seemed to burn with constant fire, lightning cutting through black clouds as sand danced in venomous whirlwinds. It was a planet that spared no one, not even the best equipped, and now it would test something even more fragile, humanity in its purest form. Alina, armed with nothing but her courage and instincts, was left on this unforgiving terrain to achieve the improbable. The biting winds carried not only the cold but the shadow of a challenge, closely observed by the skeptical gazes of the Craner Empire's High Council. No human will survive here without technology. This experiment is nothing but a farce, echoed General Drovak's voice in the holographic chamber, as the counselors recorded every movement of the contender. The goal was clear, to prove that the strength of the Delsera colony did not rely on machines, but on ingenuity and resilience. For Alina, however, the experiment was more than political, it was personal. The resources of her colony had been pushed to their limits, and the survival of thousands depended on her victory. Yet, while the Council's expectations were bound to cold logic, Alina knew the true test would be emotional and instinctual. This isn't just about conquering the planet, she thought as she touched the ground for the first time. It's about becoming part of it. Her first steps on Rixia 12 were an assault on the senses. The suffocating heat drained her energy, while the thin air made every breath a conscious effort. The ground, hard and cracked, seemed to hum faintly beneath her feet, as if the planet were studying her. Even so, she didn't falter. Gathering twisted branches from a plant that emitted a sharp, acrid odor, Alina began to improvise. She built a small fire and used the smoke to ward off the crawling insects that emerged from the cracks in the ground. "Nothing here is safe," she whispered to herself, though her eyes showed determination rather than fear. Meanwhile, in the High Council, the debate raged on. Xeris, a young counselor who had supported Alina's participation from the start, watched the screen with a spark of curiosity. She's not just reacting to the environment. She's learning from it. "This is more than survival," he said, drawing disapproving looks from his peers. "Learning means nothing when facing something as relentless as Rixia 12, Drovak retorted, crossing his arms. But Xeris sensed there was something deeper unfolding. The planet, with all its hostility, seemed to be a teacher, and Alina was listening. That night, as the wind howled and predators prowled in the distance, Alina found shelter in a narrow cave. She used stones and branches to create an improvised barrier at the entrance, securing a relatively safe night. Sitting by the dim light of her fire, she gazed at the stars above the violent horizon. "You're trying to break me, but I won't give in," she murmured to the planet. For the first time since her arrival, she felt a spark of hope. Rixia 12 wasn't just an enemy. It was a puzzle, and she was determined to solve it. The dawn on Rixia 12 brought a dim light that barely pierced through the dense clouds. The heat was already unbearable, and Alina knew she couldn't afford to rest. With cautious steps, she began exploring the area around her cave, mentally noting every detail of the environment. The uneven ground was covered in thorny plants that released vapors, stinging her throat. The wind carried particles so fine they seemed to seep directly into her pores. "This place wants to kill me, but that's nothing new," she thought as she searched for signs of water or a safer shelter. Not long after, she stumbled upon something peculiar, a series of marks on the ground forming geometric patterns. They weren't natural. Someone or something had been there. Intrigued but alarmed, Alina crouched down, touching the marks lightly with her fingertips as she scanned her surroundings. "If others are here, I might be being watched," she concluded. Rather than paralyzing her, the thought fueled her resolve to be meticulous. Using a sharp stone she had picked up earlier, she began marking her own path on twisted trees and rocky outcrops, creating a rudimentary map to help her return to the cave if needed. As she ventured further, Alina encountered a tall, pulsating plant with faintly glowing leaves. Before trusting the resource, she decided to test its safety. Tearing a strip from her clothing, she wrapped it around a stick and lightly touched the viscous sap dripping from the plant. The fabric was instantly corroded, releasing acrid smoke. Definitely not edible, she thought, stepping back. Yet the discovery reinforced a key insight. Every resource on the planet carried potential, either for survival or destruction. She just needed to learn the rules of this ecosystem. Meanwhile, the High Council closely monitored her every move with growing interest. As always, Xerus was the first to notice patterns in Alina's behavior. She's not just improvising. She's creating strategies. She's testing the environment like a scientist, not acting like a victim, he remarked. His analysis, however, faced resistance. That's irrelevant. Her improvisation will only last until the next inevitable obstacle, Drovak argued. But Xerus remained steadfast. He saw something the others preferred to ignore. Alina wasn't merely surviving. She was learning to communicate with the planet on its own terms. The scorching sun soon forced Alina to retreat to a shaded area, where she found a small stream surrounded by sharp rocks. The water was murky, but it was the first source she'd found since her arrival. Watching closely, she noticed small animals approach to drink, avoiding a specific section of the stream. This piqued her curiosity. Following the flow a few meters downstream, she discovered the cause. A small crack in the ground was releasing oily residues directly into the water. I need to be more careful than I thought, she concluded. Using the same fabric she had tested on the plant, she fashioned an improvised filter, hoping it would be enough to remove the worst of the contamination. As the day wore on, Alina began preparing for the night, her greatest enemy so far. Returning to the cave, she reinforced the entrance with larger rocks, creating a sturdier barrier. Using dry branches collected during the day, she set up simple traps, hoping to catch something that could serve as food. Even as her hands worked, her mind was elsewhere, trying to decipher the meaning of the marks on the ground and the behavioral patterns of the small predators she'd observed. Nothing here is random, she thought. If there's something the planet is trying to teach me, I need to pay attention. That night, the silence was broken by strange sounds. A metallic noise, distant but rhythmic, echoed through a nearby canyon. Alina froze, trying to pinpoint its source. It didn't seem to belong to the natural environment. Gripping a sharp stone, she remained alert, but the sound faded as quickly as it had begun. I'm not alone, she concluded, a mix of unease and curiosity filling her thoughts. For the first time, she felt that Rixiop 12 was more than just a hostile planet. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. As she lay down to try to sleep, Alina looked at the stars through the small opening of the cave. The vastness of the universe seemed to watch her, as distant as the members of the High Council who judged her every action. Yet, for her, the moment felt intimate. I'm just one piece here, but even a small piece can change the game, she whispered before closing her eyes. With the dawn of a new day, Rixia 12 revealed more of its secrets. The landscape seemed different, as though the planet itself had shifted to confuse Alina. Trees that once stood firm now appeared to have been swallowed by the ground, and the geometric markings she had followed the previous day had vanished under a fine layer of dust carried by the nocturnal winds. Nothing here is static, she thought, realizing the planet was not just a testing ground, but also an intelligent adversary. Nevertheless, she decided to press on, relying on her intuition and the rudimentary map she had started sketching. As she moved forward, Alina came across a narrow canyon with steep walls covered in vegetation that glowed faintly in the dark. Intrigued, she approached to investigate. The plants emitted a sweet, almost hypnotic scent, and small winged creatures hovered around them, drawn in by an irresistible allure. Alina observed for a few minutes and watched as one of the creatures landed on the glowing leaves. In an instant, the plant contracted, trapping the creature with swift, precise movements. A predator disguised as bait, she concluded, stepping away cautiously. The lesson was clear. Even beauty on Rixia 12 was a trap. Soon after, Alina stumbled upon something that made her heart race. A structure partially buried in the ground. Its contours were unmistakably artificial, made of a metal that seemed indestructible despite being corroded by time. She approached cautiously, scanning the surroundings before stepping inside. Something felt off, a sense that the structure wasn't truly abandoned. Inside, she found narrow corridors and scattered debris, as if a battle had once taken place there. But what caught her attention was a central chamber, where a small sphere floated above a pedestal, emitting a faint, pulsating light. In the High Council, Alina's discovery sparked a wave of debate. If she's found advanced technology, this changes everything, Drovak said, his eyes glinting with concern. Xeris, however, saw something deeper. She's uncovering something we've ignored for years. The connection between the planet and its ancient civilizations. We can't interfere now. The Council, divided, watched intently as Alina approached the sphere, fully aware that her next actions could have unpredictable consequences. Alina hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity overpowered her caution. She carefully touched the surface of the sphere, and immediately, the room around her lit up. A hologram appeared, displaying images of various alien species, all attempting to dominate the planet's environment, and all failing. The images showed destroyed cities, forests consuming metallic structures, and storms erasing any attempts at colonization. At the end, a message was projected in a language Alina didn't fully understand but whose meaning seemed clear. Do not conquer. Understand. The weight of the words resonated with Alina as she exited the structure. She realized the planet wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a philosophical test. But what did the planet expect from her? And what would happen if she failed to decipher its message in time? These questions lingered as she returned to her cave, carrying fragments of metal and wires she had found in the structure. Though she didn't yet know how to use them, she was certain they would be useful. That night, as Alina tried to assemble rudimentary tools with the materials she had gathered, a sound sent chills down her spine. It was the same rhythmic metallic noise she had heard the previous night, but this time it was much closer. Gripping a sharp stone, she stepped out of the cave and saw something she would never forget. A tall, slender figure cloaked in a suit that glowed faintly, moving slowly toward the structure she had explored. The figure didn't appear hostile, but its presence was undeniably intimidating. Before she could act, the figure vanished into the shadows. Back in the cave, Alina barely managed to sleep. Her mind was overwhelmed with questions. Who was that figure? Was it a relic of the planet's past, or something else entirely? And why had the sphere shown her those images? She knew her journey was only beginning and that the answers she sought might be more complex and dangerous than she had imagined. In the High Council, Xeris observed in silence, a faint smile on his lips. He knew Alina had crossed an important threshold. She's starting to understand the true purpose of the test, he said to himself. But even he couldn't predict what would come next. The third day on Rixia, 12 began with a restlessness Alina couldn't shake. The figure she had seen the previous night felt more like a warning than a threat, but its meaning remained a mystery. The environment around her continued to shift in subtle ways, as though the planet was directly responding to her presence. Trees that had once been barren now bore small sprouts, and the once cracked earth seemed less arid. It was almost as if the planet were testing the limits of her perception. Alina decided she needed to explore further, even if it meant leaving her zone of safety. As she walked, Alina realized she was beginning to adapt to the rhythm of the planet. Every step was calculated, every move a deliberate choice. She discovered a small spring hidden among rocks, but upon testing the water, she found it contaminated with metallic particles. Nothing here is given without a price, she thought, filtering what she could and storing the rest in an improvised container made from tree bark. This process reminded her of an important truth. Surviving on Rixia, 12 wasn't just physical. It was about finding balance between need and caution. While gathering resources, Alina noticed something unusual on the horizon. A canyon that had seemed empty before now revealed a series of structures similar to the one she had found earlier. However, these appeared even more damaged, as though they had been consumed by the planet itself. Approaching cautiously, she saw that the ground around the ruins was littered with humanoid and alien bones, many fused to fragments of metal. The sight was both disturbing and revealing. They tried to control the planet and paid the price, she murmured, feeling the weight of her own mortality. Inside the largest structure, Alina found a broken panel that still seemed partially functional. Using the wires and parts she had collected earlier, She managed to improvise a connection that reactivated part of the system. What she saw was as fascinating as it was terrifying. A holographic projection showing the planet as part of an intergalactic network. Each point on the map pulsed with energy, indicating that Rixia 12 was just one node in something far greater. However, the map also highlighted areas marked in red, as if they were isolated or destroyed. What happened here wasn't an accident, she concluded, feeling as though she was closing in on a truth no one else had uncovered. Meanwhile, the tension in the High Council was palpable. Xeris grew increasingly convinced that Alina was uncovering something fundamental. She's connecting the dots. This isn't just about survival. It's about understanding what this planet truly is, he said, while other counselors remained skeptical. Drovak, however, seemed more worried than dismissive. If she activates something she doesn't understand, the consequences could be catastrophic. We're tampering with forces beyond our comprehension. Despite the heated debates, everyone knew they couldn't interfere. This was Alina's test, and only she could decide her next move. Back in the canyon, Alina continued her investigation. Each new discovery brought more questions than answers. She found a room where the remnants of a battle were still evident. Scorch marks on the walls, broken tools on the floor, and, at the center, a device that appeared to have been forcibly removed from its base. They weren't just exploring. They were fighting over something, she thought as she examined the remains. She picked up a small crystal that seemed intact and tucked it away, imagining it might be useful later. On her way back to the cave, she realized she was being followed again by the figure she had seen before. This time, however, she decided not to retreat. She stopped and turned, facing the shadow trailing her. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice echoing into the void. The figure stepped out of the shadows, revealing a suit that seemed to be a fusion of metal and fabric, with a helmet obscuring its face. "You're nearing something you weren't meant to find," the figure said, its voice metallic and distant. Before Alina could respond, the figure vanished, leaving her with even more questions. Back in the cave, Alina felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. With every discovery, Rixia 12 became less of an enemy and more of a puzzle that demanded to be solved. She knew she wasn't just fighting for her survival. She was fighting for something greater, something that could redefine her understanding of the universe. As she sat down to reorganize her resources, she looked at the crystal she had found and the map she had reactivated. "All of this is connected, and I'm going to figure out how," she said to herself, her confidence renewed. On the fourth day, Alina noticed something that completely shifted her perspective. The geometric markings that had disappeared from the ground were now engraved on the inner walls of the cave. The pattern was identical but appeared more complex now, almost as if the planet was trying to communicate with her. "This can't be a coincidence," she thought, tracing the lines with her fingers. Each shape seemed to hold a logic, a kind of language she couldn't fully understand but that seemed to activate something deep within her. Driven by this new discovery, Alina decided to follow one of the paths indicated on the holographic map. It was a long and grueling journey, but her instincts told her it was necessary. The landscape changed dramatically as she advanced. Wind-sculpted mountains loomed like colossal towers from a forgotten era, and the ground became more solid, as if she were entering the planet's core. Yet, the sense of being watched never left her. The mysterious figure had not reappeared, but Alina knew she was not alone. Reaching a deep valley, Alina found what seemed to be the center of the network of structures scattered across the planet. It was an enormous metallic dome, partially buried in the earth. Its surface gleamed under the starlight, and small pulses of energy coursed through its contours. As she approached, the air grew heavier around her, almost as though the planet was reacting to her presence. Taking a deep breath, Alina stepped inside. The interior of the dome was breathtaking. Streams of energy ran along the walls, forming patterns that resembled those she had seen in the cave. At the center, a pedestal held a sphere similar to the one she had encountered before, but this one emitted a stronger, steadier light. When she touched its surface, a new holographic projection was activated. This time, it wasn't just images but sounds and fragments of language. Alina felt she was beginning to understand. The projection revealed an endless cycle of destruction and reconstruction. Civilizations had tried to colonize Rixia 12 countless times, yet all had failed for one simple reason. They attempted to dominate rather than coexist. The message was clear. The planet was a living entity, an intelligence that demanded respect and balance. Do not conquer, learn, adapt, the final message declared. These words echoed in Alina's mind as she knelt before the sphere, realizing her survival up to this point was no accident. She had passed the test because she had respected the planet and adapted her actions to its rules. In the High Council, Alina's discoveries had an immediate impact. Xeris was ecstatic. She solved the enigma. Rixia 12 isn't just a testing ground. It's a guardian. It's a lesson for all of us, he said, while his colleagues struggled to process what they had witnessed. Drovak, once the mission's harshest critic, now remained silent. He understood that the implications of Alina's findings could forever alter the course of the Craner Empire. Before leaving the dome, Alina noticed something peculiar. The sphere projected another map, but this one was different. It didn't just show Rixia 12 but other planets within the same network. Each planet pulsed with energy, as though it were alive, and they all seemed connected by an invisible path. This isn't the end. It's the beginning, Alina said, overwhelmed by the enormity of her discovery. As she exited the dome, the planet seemed calmer, almost welcoming. The storms had temporarily subsided, and even the predators appeared to keep a respectful distance. It was as though Rixia 12 itself recognized that Alina had understood its message. Yet she knew her journey was far from over. There were more planets to explore, more enigmas to unravel, and more lessons to learn. While returning to her cave, carrying the map's data and fragments from her journey, Alina felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. A connection to something greater than herself. For the first time, she didn't feel isolated. She felt part of something that transcended her understanding but, at the same time, seemed to embrace her. At dawn on the 5th day, Alina awoke with an unsettling feeling. The planet was eerily silent. The wind, which never ceased, had stopped. The sounds of the small predators that usually prowled during the night had vanished. It was as though Rixia 12 was holding its breath, waiting for her to take the next step. Alina knew she couldn't ignore the weight of this change. "What are you trying to tell me now?" she murmured, as if the planet could hear her. Following the holographic map projected by the dome, Alina walked for hours until she reached a location marked in red. It was an arid plain, riddled with cracks that emitted a faint blue glow. At the center stood a large metallic device, resembling an antenna, though its purpose was indecipherable. Approaching cautiously, Alina noticed the device was damaged. Wires hung loose from its base, and a central crystal appeared to have been forcibly removed. This explains the red marking on the map. Something was taken from here, and the planet's balance was broken because of it, she concluded, feeling a mix of frustration and responsibility. As she examined the device, footsteps sounded behind her. Turning quickly, she once again faced the mysterious figure that had been watching her. This time, the figure didn't try to hide. "You understand now, don't you?" it said, in a metallic voice that seemed to reverberate inside Alina's mind. "This planet is not just a test. It is a guardian of something greater." The figure revealed a small crystal, identical to the one Alina had found in the dome. "This is the heart of the device. Without it, the planet will never return to balance. The question is, are you willing to risk your survival to restore it?" The dilemma was clear and cruel. Alina knew that attempting to restore the device could unleash forces she didn't fully understand. But at the same time, leaving the planet in its current state would mean disregarding everything she had learned. "I came here to survive, but now I understand my survival is irrelevant if I fail you," she replied, looking directly at the figure. The figure tilted its head, as if analyzing her words, and handed the crystal to Alina before disappearing back into the shadows. With the crystal in hand, Alina began to work. Using the improvised tools she had created over the past few days, she managed to reconnect some of the wires and insert the crystal into the device. The process was slow and exhausting, but finally, the device began to emit a rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo through the ground. The blue glow in the surrounding cracks intensified, and the air became charged with energy. Alina felt a wave of warmth surge through her body, as if the planet itself was thanking her. In the High Council, the reaction was immediate. She's meddling with something she doesn't understand. This could be disastrous. Drovak shouted, while Xeris observed intently. She's doing exactly what we hoped, restoring balance. Rixia 12 is not just a testing ground. It's a partner, and she has recognized that, he said, his voice firm and full of conviction. For the first time, the entire council fell silent, acknowledging the significance of what they were witnessing. When the device finally stabilized, a new holographic projection emerged. It was the same intergalactic map Alina had seen before, but now the red points had disappeared. Each planet pulsed with a steady, harmonious light, as if the network had finally been restored. This is more than balance. It's connection, she thought, gazing at the hologram. However, the projection also revealed something else. A new route leading to another planet in the network. Exhausted but triumphant, Alina began walking back to her cave. The planet, once hostile and unpredictable, now seemed calmer, almost welcoming. The storms had completely ceased, and the predators kept a respectful distance. Maybe the real test was never survival. Maybe it was understanding that not everything needs to be conquered, she reflected, as the cave came into view on the horizon. That night, as she rested, Alina looked at the crystal she still held and the map projected in her mind. She knew her journey was far from over. The planet had entrusted her with a secret, and she bore the responsibility of sharing it with her colony and beyond. For the first time, she felt truly connected to something greater than herself, something that transcended borders and species. When the rescue transport finally arrived, Alina felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Looking out one last time at the vastness of Rixia 12, she realized she was leaving behind not just a planet, but a mentor. The planet had shaped not only her survival but also her understanding of balance, humility, and connection. She boarded the ship with the holographic map and crystal in hand, knowing her journey was far from over. Back at the colony, Alina was welcomed as a hero, but her mind was restless. The celebrations and speeches didn't interest her. She knew the real work was just beginning. She gathered the colony's leaders and presented everything she had learned on Rixia 12. The planet wasn't a testing ground but a part of an interconnected network, holding secrets that could redefine humanity's relationship with the universe. The crystal she had brought back was a key to something greater, but also a reminder of the cost of ignoring natural laws. Within the High Council, the impact of Alina's actions was undeniable. Xeris became one of her strongest advocates, using his influence to promote a new paradigm. Instead of dominating planets, the Craner Empire should learn to coexist with them. What Alina has shown us is not just a lesson for her or her colony. It's a lesson for all of us, he declared during an assembly, earning a mix of admiration and hesitation from his peers. Even Drovak, her harshest critic, acknowledged that Alina's survival represented something extraordinary. Perhaps we underestimated not only her but the very essence of humanity, he admitted reluctantly. Meanwhile, Alina worked tirelessly to decipher more of the holographic map. Each planet in the network seemed to hold its own enigma, its own balance that needed to be restored. She knew her journey on Rixia 12 was just the beginning. The next point on the map pulsed with an intense light, almost as if it were calling to her. If we've learned to listen to one planet, maybe we can learn to listen to them all, she thought as she prepared her team for the next mission. Yet Alina's journey wasn't only physical. Rixia 12 had planted in her a new way of thinking, a new way of leading. In her reflections, she began to see her experience as a metaphor for humanity itself, a reminder that progress shouldn't be a straight line but a dance with the natural limits of the universe. It's not weakness to coexist. It's the greatest strength we can achieve, she concluded as she gazed at the night sky, where the planets in the network glimmered like silent guides. As she set off for her next journey, Alina knew she was carrying more than tools and information. She was carrying new hope for her colony, and perhaps for the entire galaxy. But more than that, she carried the certainty that survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something greater, and as her ship disappeared into hyperspace, Rixia 12 remained silent, a guardian of ancient secrets and a testament to human resilience. The planet knew its message had been heard and that the future now rested in the hands of someone who dared to listen.